Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hello, hello, hello. It's a Monday. Yeah, she needs to tell me. It's a Monday. It is a Monday in the lovely month of July. It's the 21st day of July. And I know there's a science behind how, or is it math? Because I'm totally flummoxed generally in either. But does this have to do with Einstein's theory of relativity that as you age, time seems to go so fast? And when you're young, it's so slow. There's something, my mother tried to explain it to me once because she's got a scientific head. And I just can't get it. I mean, it's just not some generalized thing that we all sort of start feeling because, you know, you're on the downslope of your life. It's something that really, anybody help me out here? I always think of you guys as so dang smart. So, as usual, I recommend do not read the newspapers, do not look at news, do not. It is wholly unsettling and distressing. And you can easily get sort of in a state of, sort of hopelessness and helplessness or anger or nothing good. And while I don't subscribe to ignorance as a way of navigating one's life, I do think sometimes a constant immersion, well, you know I think that, a constant immersion in reality can be detrimental to one's overall health. So, I'm going to sort of tiptoe around most of those big stories that we talked about on Friday. They're all still with us. And try to find other things a little maybe closer to home where the sense of hopelessness or helplessness is not as great the closer you get to, you know, where you actually live. There is more of a feeling that you can have some effect, some influence, which is not to say that we cannot on the larger stage, but clearly not as much. So, okay, so then where does that put us? I'll tell you. Let's start with, this is an email that came in, I believe, on Thursday of last week, toward the end of the show. Didn't have time to get it in. I forget exactly the topic. Some of you will remember. But it is about how Oh, I think I had said something about sending a child to his or her room, which used to be such a horrific punishment since there was nothing in your room but your bed, is not a punishment at all anymore. It's where a child wants to be, because that's where they are free to use all their gizmos and not have their parents staring over their shoulder. So we were talking about that, and Mike from Philly did write this in. He's a teacher, so he has a sometimes different perspective. And this, if you're an older person, might really blow your mind. It doesn't blow mine, but listen to this. He says, as a teacher, I see how smartphones are the lifeblood of teenagers. And yeah, parents take away their phones all the time. It's an automatic detention at our school to have your phone in a classroom. All phones must be in lockers. And when the bell rings, the students sprint. No pun intended, since I guess their phones could be sprint. They sprint to their lockers quickly to check their phones before they move on to their next class. One of the most amazing things, he says, that I have heard this year, here it is. A group of girls were sitting and talking, and one turned to her friends and said, "You are not going to believe this, but he called me last night." And the girl's friend's response to that was, "Ooh, and creepy." It was not a positive response to, "He called me last night." And Mike in Philly says, when I was a teenager, if someone called you, you were on cloud nine. I mean, not calling someone, and now calling someone is literally considered creepy. You can only text. You can never call. Now, Jess, wait a minute, because you're laughing. You think that's even extreme from your 20-something-year-old a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like talking on the phone, but if it was like somebody I liked.
You really liked, you would like that. Okay.
Yeah.
So in case you didn't hear, Jess says, I don't like talking on the phone, but if it was somebody I really, really like and they called, I would like that. What does this mean in terms of the ability of young people to verbally, obviously, interact? How do relationships ever happen anymore? Amazing. And wouldn't the boy who called her have known, living in the culture he lives in, that he was apparently out of bounds by calling her? So you remember in the day when you only had one phone in the house, right? And you were a teenager and all you wanted to do was be on the phone all night talking to your friends ad nauseum, how your parents would be screaming and yelling, "Get off the phone!" And it's not as though you could hear if someone else was trying to call you. There were no little beeps, no little call waiting, no info, no IDs, no. One phone. Get off the phone! Jeez. But, I mean, I get hung up on this. Sort of imagining where we're heading with these obviously now very different ways of communication. And even this don't call me stuff has entered my reality in my life, in that I have now become somebody who, if I want to get some information to somebody, I don't call them. I do text them.
Mm-hmm.
It's quicker.
You
It's.
texted me just this
I
morning.
texted you this morning. We had little quick texts back and forth. And if I'd had to call and we talked, I mean, it's much easier and more efficient. It doesn't mean I don't want to talk to Jess. It doesn't mean I don't like Jess. It's just in terms of taking care of business, that works better. And so I think I have voiced this before. I'm annoyed by people who I can't text. And there aren't many, but there are some. Caller, hi.
Yes, this is Clarence from Canonsburg.
Clarence, Mr.
Hey.
Clarence from Canonsburg. Yes.
I don't text unless, like you said, it's information. Meet me at 3.
That's right.
I'm here. Short little things.
Right.
Where
It's
you don't have
usually It's usually logistics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate
Long.
when people text me sentences and paragraphs. Like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? I can't type on this little phone, this little thing. I have to, my next text after a long text to me is, I'm calling.
Yes,
that's it.
right.
If you wanna- if I
Are
can't
you
have a
home? Yeah, I'm
conversation,
calling
do
you. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And what I am curious about when it comes to teenagers texting back and forth, I know I get this on Facebook a lot when I'm saying something, in words. People are using their own voice in their head, and they're misconstruing what I'm saying.
Oh, God.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're reading it the wrong way, and you can't do that without your voice.
No.
You know what I mean? Even emoticons or whatever those things are called that don't help sometimes. Like, dude, I was kidding.
Well, I know I don't use those either, but the fact that now so many people do, that they have to tell you after they say something, they have to do a little stupid face with a wink.
Yeah,
Or-
the face with a wink or a sad face or a
Yeah.
happy face or something.
Because they're not hearing your voice.
Exactly. And that's when she said, oh, he actually called me, the girl. It's like, yeah. He might have texted you and you might have taken it the wrong way. Just, how do you communicate, with somebody without voice? And what is it, the ups and downs and
Yeah.
and all that. I don't know what's going to happen with that.
Or even, and you lose all those. Communication is not just the words; it is tone,
Mm-hmm.
and it is body language.
Mm-hmm.
It is looking at somebody as they're talking, and a lot of people aren't good at just deciphering words. And as I found out from being somebody who talks a lot, that things I say, which I just assume people know are sarcastic, totally lost on people. Take it straightforwardly and don't realize that I'm kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well.
Yeah, and I talk with my body too.
Yes,
yeah,
me too.
I act things out. If you ever see me in conversation, I don't just stand there. It's not just with my hands; it's almost like a whole body movement.
Right.
Yeah, you're really not getting any, half of what I'm saying if you can't see me.
Exactly.
And I do people's voices too. If I'm talking about somebody, I mimic. I don't know what that's about. That might even sound strange, but
No.
I've caught myself doing it all the time.
No.
Yeah, and he said, "Yeah, man, blah blah blah." But
Well,
then she
no,
said, "No, you're mad at it."
No, that makes you a very good person to have a conversation with. That's entertaining.
So I don't know what the future is going to hold.
Well, I don't either, but
Yeah.
I must say it troubles me some. But it is what it is. I mean, talk about feeling helpless. I mean, there's nothing one can do with the juggernaut of technology.
Yeah, the
Nothing.
good thing for me is, when it becomes standard, I'll be dead. And
Right.
right now, I'm old enough just to tell some kid, I'm calling you. I'll just tell a kid, hey, won't you text me, Uncle Clarence? I'm not texting you. I'm calling you. Pick up the phone. Just tell them what I'm going to do.
Here, here. Nice talking to you.
Same here. Okay.
Okay,
Bye.
bye. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and then Mike actually put a little PS on it, texted again, and this is a little bit different thought, but a report from the high school in Philly. My students don't do Facebook ever. So Facebook is old people's territory now, apparently, because their parents are on Facebook. And they then can monitor what they're putting on Facebook. Well, I know my sister's on Facebook. Her kids, I know at least her daughter's on Facebook. And so, yeah, there's a lot of... So anyway, they are all now on Snapchat.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a server that keeps messages for only about 15 seconds. And then the message disappears. Okay, so what entrepreneur came up with that, and what were they getting to? They just were...
Lots of people, I feel like a lot of people, like...
What would that be about?
do, like, dirty stuff.
Little dirty stuff. Or, like, if you sext a picture or something.
Right, you can screenshot it before it disappears, so it's really kind of...
You could still get stuck with it being out there.
Yeah, if someone was, like...
Was being a jerk.
To do that, yeah.
But okay, so Snapchat.
People like to make ugly faces for that too. They're like, like that.
So obviously, if you're using Snapchat, talking to your friends, you do not want any record of whatever has been said. And Mike says that this allows them to not have their parents obviously monitoring them, and they can send messages and, more importantly, pictures, as you say, Jess, without having them hanging out there, which Mike also says he finds disturbing. Margaret writes about the guy who called the girl, and the girl's friend's reaction was, ew, and how creepy. Margaret says, well, maybe the kid is just really creepy. But I don't think that was it. Dorothea, going back to my thing about time going faster. As I approach my senior years, there is no doubt that time is going faster. And although I agree with you that we should not be ignorant of the news, I find myself changing my priorities. The concerns and issues of youth and of middle age are no longer the concerns and issues of my senior years. I am not the political junkie I once was. Now I'm a grandson junkie. I'm still concerned with world headlines, but I'm more concerned with only the world I see from where I'm standing to the distant horizon. So you're saying that as a grandmother, you look now at the world and wonder and perhaps wring your hands over, well, exactly what we're talking about now. What world will he inherit and have to navigate? We won't know, just as parents throughout history have not known. And in that regard, I think ignorance will be bliss. Bill writes, Lynn, I had this time thing. I had it explained to me as time being a percentage of your age. If you are 8 years old and you know that you can drive when you turn 16, well, that is twice the life you have already lived, and that seems like you will have to wait a lifetime to drive. Yeah, that would be true. Conversely, when you are 80, you will be 88 in no time, since from 80 to 88 is only 10% of the life that you have already lived. Nah, I think that's really, he says this wasn't a very articulate explanation, but I've only had one cup of coffee. Well, no, heck, I think that's a very, I mean, I can get my head around that. It makes perfect sense to me. perfect sense to me. And my mom has said, since her birthday's coming up, and it's not like a special birthday with a 0 on the end, she says hello.
Good morning, Lynn. It's Dave from Washington.
Hi, Dave.
You got a bunch of topics going on, all of which I find very entertaining.
Oh, good.
I'm one of those weirdos who can kind of remember pretty much everything I've ever done.
Oh, God.
And so when I think back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it doesn't seem that long ago. Because I can remember it with tremendous clarity. And, excuse me, I've been running around. Right now, I am 11 years and 6 months from the date that I can retire with full Social Security benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And I think back 11 and a half years ago, which wasn't that long ago. Now, of course, if I was 10 years old, 11 and a half years is a long, long time.
Yeah.
But at my age now, I can do 11 and a half years standing on my head.
Yeah.
That's
Seems like a snap. Yeah. Well, yeah.
And then I took this job, another new job, which I'm going to last for 11 and a half years for. And then I'm done, and I can't wait. I'm so excited, even though it's a decade away.
Because that seems like that's easily doable. You've done many of them.
Absolutely.
Piece of work.
I can remember 12 years ago. I don't know if you remember. Of course, you probably don't. I moved to New York 12 years ago. And that just seems, I've still got boxes of stuff I haven't unpacked from that move.
Yeah, right. I know that feeling, too.
And as for kids and their cell phones, the lost art or talent of telephone conversation, it does sadden me. Even I don't talk on the phone a fraction as much as I used to.
Neither do I. Absolutely don't.
And I used to be really good at it. I mean, I could flirt on the phone.
Yeah.
If I had to call the utility company about something, invariably I got my way. Because I could just flirt with the little customer service person on the other end there. And
well, you can't flirt with them anymore, even if you wanted to.
No, you
since
can't.
they're disembodied voices.
So, yeah. And I broke down finally last December and got a smartphone. I didn't have one. I resisted it for years and years because I'm surrounded with computers as it is, and one that I carried around in my pocket was the last thing I needed, especially since I didn't make any phone calls. But my daughter, who's 30 years old, said, she texts her mom and her friends all the time. She said, get a smartphone, and I'll hear from her more often because she never calls.
That is correct.
Yeah, but you know what? After about 4 or 5 of these things, I was like, don't text me anymore. It's just such inane crap. And again, it's a sentence or two. You can't carry on a conversation.
Well, no, that's not a conversation. It really is like letting you know where they are, when they'll be back, what the that's what it's for, I think. And
yeah, and Clarence, I guess it was, said, it's for the logistics. Meet me at 3.
Right.
Meet me here. I'm leaving now.
Well, like what I said to Jess. I texted her saying, running late, bus hasn't come. She texts back, let me know if I should start the countdown. Just quick little back and forth.
But then the second problem with that is I like to write emails. I have a big desktop computer, of course, and I will sit there and I will read or write an email, a 500-word email. But people aren't getting those on their computers anymore. They're getting them on their phone.
And they don't want to read that.
I would not read a big, long email.
No, that's right. I usually check my email on my phone. You're right. We don't want everything you see. Human interaction is just getting more compressed, shorter, quicker, more staccato. Get rid of all the adjectives and adverbs and just do nouns and verbs and direct information.
I was at a Chinese buffet a couple weeks ago, and to my left was a little old couple sitting there at a table, just chatting away with one another. They didn't shut up long enough to eat. And on my right was a young couple, and the two of them sat there staring at their phones and didn't say boo to each other the whole afternoon.
Right. Well,
and I was like,
there it is. It is what it is. Hey, thank you for the call. I enjoyed it.
You're very welcome.
I enjoyed talking on the phone with you.
I love talking on the phone.
Okay.
You can modulate your voice. You can, move the phone around so you can get certain emphasis and effect.
Yes. Somebody who rides their voice like I do, you can imagine how sort of just I mean, how awful it is to just text, in fact, because there's no way for me to put emphasis. You're right, emphasize anything. Oh, well.
Also, incidentally, just so you know, I think your video stream is down, but your audio is up, so it's good.
No, lies.
Jess says she's got, well, thank you.
Okay.
All
Okay,
right, thanks
bye.
a lot, Lynn.
Bye, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, also in this, sort of on this topic, I came upon this. Where did I get this? The Wall Street Journal, Saturday. By the way, may I suggest to you that the Saturday Wall Street Journal is one of the better print issues that comes out. And I must admit, this is since Rupert Murdoch bought the thing. They have, the Saturday is full of often very, very interesting reviews of books, more long-form stuff on topics of interest, or if you really want to stretch your head. And I try every time to read it almost cover to cover, because it's how you learn. Because there's things that I wouldn't normally turn to, but it's just really well done. I recommend it. Now, this, though, is a piece about the fact, and I think I've railed about this all my life, how I think for some people it is literally not just impossible to sit quietly by themselves, but rather it's almost akin to torture for them. It's not just that it's hard. No, I don't want to. I get bored. It is, I'd rather you pull my fingernails out. Please. I need some stimulation. To be left with just your brain as the only potential stimulation is for, it turns out, according to research, it is for most people really, really difficult. Give you what I know. First of all, it turns out that when we do absolutely nothing, let's say sit in a quiet room with your thoughts, that your brain, you know, things are always going on in that brain. And it turns out that when you do absolutely nothing, many of the parts of your brain that actually underpin complex thinking light up. You don't necessarily have to be thinking any heavy thought. If you allow yourself to sit quietly, the parts of your brain that are tied up in some heavy-duty thinking are ready to go. And if you ask some of the greatest thinkers in history, like, let's do Isaac Newton or Descartes, Descartes said he did he had his most important insights when he was sitting in essentially a closet-sized room, because it was the only place he could get warm during a military campaign in the Netherlands. And he was just stuck in this room because it was warm by himself. And he said he had most of his insights there in that quiet. Newton, too, said, when asked, well, how'd you come up with that idea? He always said, well, I was just sitting there thinking. So it's important. And a lot of good stuff comes out of just sitting there thinking. But listen to this. This scientists studied, University of Virginia. This is a psychological study. So this professor takes some of his college students and he asks them to sit for 15 minutes alone in a room doing nothing but thinking. Just sit there and, whatever your head goes, go. Just sit there. And they did it. And when they emerged, they were asked certain questions. And most of them said that they simply couldn't concentrate. They couldn't get their heads to do anything at all. And half of them said they were going nuts, that they actively were just really unhappy, felt trapped. Now, I, hearing that, of course, immediately thought, well, yeah, because we're talking about these, texting people, these kids with their growing up on television and, computers and video games, and they've got the attention span of a gnat. Of course they can't do it. Turns out I'm not right about that. Same group of scientists took a bunch of old farts, middle-aged people and older people, from a church group and asked them to do the same thing. Sit in a room for 15 minutes, don't do anything, just think. And they came out and actually disliked the experience even more than the students had. And in fact, 1/3 of the students admitted later that they actually had cheated during it because they'd taken out their cell phones and checked their phones. Okay, so they absolutely could not do it, couldn't bear it. But here's the upshot. They up the ante in the study. They give these people, the researchers, a little electric shock. They ask all of them, what'd you think of that? They all said, what do you mean, what'd I think of that? I hate it. Stop that. And they said, would you pay me to stop from giving you that little shock again? Almost to a man and a woman, yes. They said, yeah, I would pay you. I would pay you. That's how awful it is. Then, get this. The researchers put all these people, students and older people, back into the room by themselves, individually, and also gave them the little shock button. And they said the same thing. Sit there, do nothing. Guess what? Amazingly, many of them sitting there for 15 minutes decided to push the button, to shock themselves, just to have some input, just to have something change from the maddening silence of sitting by themselves. There was a big sex difference, big gender difference. 67%, 2/3 of the males preferred shocking themselves during the experience to just sitting there doing nothing. So the males were sitting there electrocuting themselves because that seemed preferable. And only 1/4 of the females did. Which, who knows what that means. It leads you to believe maybe that women are more capable of sitting quietly with their heads, that men can't. But the way that they, at the end, they say, it is easy to blame the modern world for this inability. But 1,000 years ago and 1,000 years before that, monks reported the same problem. Meditation, there's a reason it's considered a discipline that requires practice and effort, because obviously our animal instinct or impulse is to not be sitting doing nothing. It is to be acting, doing, moving. And so rather than have, I don't know, it could just be, see, I could easily sit for 15 minutes alone. I prefer it. I seek such moments out. Not in a sensory deprivation room, like where there would be no sound or anything. No, that I would not like. But like sitting out, let's say in the backyard, where I can hear birds or, feel the wind or whatever. Then I think of that as just heaven. Okay, guess what I didn't do?
Like we even have to take a break.
Ah!
But we can't.
Jess says like we even have to. Have you noticed? I got no commercials this summer. I mean, none.
You had one.
Yeah, big deal. So, like, if you've noticed, we're only taking one break a show now. Why should we take breaks just to have you listen to the PSA du jour? What is the PSA du jour?
I just pick one.
You just throw them out there. You don't even know. All right. Let's take a break anyway, just so I can guzzle my pop a little bit here. And okay? Thank you.
Stick around for more with Lynn Cullen Live after this.
Need to get some rest. This is the worst headache ever.
Right arm's all tingly all of a sudden. Must have slept on it last night.
I keep losing my balance. These old bones need some exercise.
Granddaddy, what you just said doesn't even make sense. It sounds like gibberish.
Signs like these could be more than what they seem. They could be a sign of stroke.
Sudden weakness or numbness of the face, arm, or leg.
Sudden trouble with vision in one or both eyes.
Sudden trouble walking or difficulty with balance.
Or a sudden intense headache that comes out of nowhere.
If you or someone you know has any of these symptoms, don't wait. Call 911 immediately. You could make a difference in someone's life, someone you love, maybe even your own.
Time lost is brain lost.
Find out more at powertoendstroke.org. Brought to you by the American Heart Association, American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
Pittsburgh City Paper's annual City Guide magazine is available now. Pick up one for a special look at the unique neighborhoods of Pittsburgh, plus the most complete guides of restaurants, bars, nightlife, festivals, exhibits, entertainment, and culture in the burg. Pittsburgh City Paper available at over 1,700 locations throughout western Pennsylvania and on the web at pghcitypaper.com, on your smartphone at citypapermobile.com.
You're listening to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Once again, here's Lynn Cullen.
And once again, here's some emails from you guys. This from Ray. Lynn, I agree that the text phenomenon has somewhat diminished the role of speech in the new generation, but I have noticed a more subtle and possibly more disturbing byproduct. As an old primate, I have always relied on facial expressions to send and receive important messages about happiness, lust, disgust, confusion, etc. But I have on numerous occasions noticed among the 20-somethings and younger a total disconnect between words and facial expressions. The problem is my generation believe your face, not your words. It's like listening to mannequins. All hail the robot overlords. Oh, yeah. Well, I do think, and I'm sure there's plenty of studies about how much information and communication that we get from each other from watching expression and also through our ears in listening to intonation, and it is true that in print you lose both. Caller. Hi.
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 So I think there's a vast difference, though, between kind of if you're by yourself and let's say you're sitting in your yard enjoying yourself, or if you're by yourself in a room with, as you said, almost sensory deprivation.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're outside, there are many stimuli
that give you pleasure or whatever. Yes, right. I agree.
That are so you don't feel as isolated. You don't feel that true sense of the void around you. I find that oftentimes if I'm getting ready to make a piece of art, or if I'm thinking about subject matter for a piece of art, or even trying to come across subject matter, that there's a channel on my cable that's classical music, and there's no commercials. It's just one song after another, after another, after another. No visuals. Strictly, there's a visual, but it's nothing worth watching. It's just, it's basically the same thing continuously. And I find that if I put that on and I lay down, not with the idea of going to sleep, but with the idea of just relaxing, that not only am I able to think, but I'm able to come to very good conclusions about what I'm thinking about. And I don't know if you're anything like me, but there's a lot of thinking going on, but there's not necessarily always great conclusions.
No, of course, right.
Yeah. Going on.
Right.
And I think that's the important part for me. As far as shocking, I would have just shocked myself right away, but that's just because of how I am. If somebody gives me a button and says, this button will shock you, I'm going to press it just to,
experience,
knowing that it's not going to kill me.
Yeah,
I'll do it just to experience it, and then I may never do it. I probably wouldn't do it again if I got bored, just because I had done it to experience it. But, so those are my thoughts on thinking.
All right, those are my thoughts on thinking. Well, thank you very much for thinking the thoughts and sharing them with us. Appreciate it. Bye. Okay, two more things coming in here from Mike. Mike, who is our conduit to the teenagers as a high school teacher. Oh, although this has to do with his wife, who's a CFO for a Fortune 500 company. Woo-woo. Okay, so his wife's way up there in corporate culture. In the case of long emails or even long texts, my wife, CFO for a Fortune 500 company, will look at the email. And if it's too long, she will respond immediately with 4 letters. TLDR. Too long, didn't read. Wow, she be tough. That's sort of rude, isn't it? TLDR. Meaning that whatever poor schmo wrote her that long thing has to pare it way down, get to the nub, and resend it. And now Mike is using that too. Well, jeez. But see, that seems sort of rude. And part of this, quick abbreviation, too long, didn't read. Well, at least she's telling you didn't read it. She didn't read it. I guess most people just don't read it. Or if somebody leaves you, here's really retro. How about people who leave you long messages on your answering machine? What are the odds that you will listen to the whole thing? Next to 0. 0. For all of you who do that, 0. Mike also says 2 other things. None of my students watch television after the age of 13. No. Okay. Now, see, I live with is my son a millennial? What's he at 20? I don't know. Oh, he's not much older than the kids you're talking about. He watches television. Doesn't watch anything I watch. Does not watch anything on the regular networks. the ones that we all grew up with. None of my students watch television after the age of 13. They download, essentially steal everything. They have no clue about any of the big shows on TV. The top 5 shows on TV, not even on their radar. He also says that I asked students if they ever paid for music. This I know. And they said, what? No, never. None of them have ever so much as paid a dime for music. They steal it on the internet. They don't consider it stealing because they just don't get why anyone would pay. They have never stepped into a record store, and they don't own CDs. They just download, steal, and I know my son does that too. And if you do it, Jess, I bet.
No.
You don't do it? Okay. Wow.
I buy my music.
Good for you. But this is why, you get with newspapers, there's a whole culture now that thinks if it's on the internet, what the hell should I pay for it? And all of this none of this is really shaken out in terms of how it's going to eventually settle. I guess it will never settle, this internet stuff, because it'll just keep changing and changing and changing. All right, well, I'm just going to move on to something a little different because I have to get this in because I had a soft spot in my heart for this actor. And you too? How could you not? Yeah. James Garner. How could you not? Is there a more likable? You could just tell you'd like the guy. And he managed to take that personality, that likability, and somehow infuse it into every character he played. And the New York Times obit likens that quality, his just sort of likable naturalness. They liken that to Jimmy Stewart for us oldsters, or Gary Cooper. And yeah, completely get that. They talk about the 2 shows he was most famous for, Maverick and the Rockford Files. And they say that in both, it worked because exactly of that cute, likable personality he had, so that Maverick actually was a send-up of the conventional Western TV drama. It was a Western with a wink, which Garner was perfect for. Why am I blanking on who played? He played Brett or Bart? Who played the other one? I can't think. And then in the Rockford Files, the same thing. Sort of a send-up of the standard TV detective. So he was just this perfect actor for those kinds of roles. You know how some men are handsome in a way that is just like almost off-putting, like they don't seem like a fellow Homo sapiens? But he had that kind of handsomeness that also just seemed perfectly natural and comfortable. And he wore it well. What else can I tell you? He had a rough childhood. He was on his own at the age of 14 and was essentially a drifter. He ended up in Korea in the war, wounded in action twice, 2 Purple Hearts, and working as a carpet layer when he got into acting, you know, one of those just sort of happenstancy kind of things that used to happen, it seems, a lot, but doesn't anymore. He was a lifelong Democrat. Yay! I knew I liked him. He was a lifelong Democrat. He was active in civil rights causes and environmental causes. In fact, met his wife in 1956 at a presidential campaign for Adlai Stevenson. And one more thing from James Garner. He disdained the pretentiousness that so many in his profession employed about acting. He said, I'm from the Spencer Tracy School. Be on time, know your lines, hit your marks, tell the truth. I don't have any theories about acting. I don't think about how to do it, except that an actor shouldn't take himself too seriously and shouldn't try to make acting something it isn't. Acting is just common sense. Now, that's interesting because I was immersed for some time this weekend in revisiting my acting past. I think I've told some of you I'm writing a one-woman show. You're all invited. Mark the date, November 17th, 6:30, Cabaret, Theater Square. Okay? It will be a fundraiser for Planned Parenthood. And in working out the show and sort of revisiting how I got to be somebody who yaps and squawks and was on TV and radio, I obviously have to get to New York, where I studied theater with considered one of the great theater teachers, acting teachers in America. He is less well known to the non-acting world as, what's his name? What's his name? Strasberg? Is that his name? Yeah. Can't think. But he was one of the founding members of the Actors Studio, from which all of those people came. Uta Hagen and all of the greats. Some of them would be the people who James Garner was talking about in terms of pretension. But the guy who I studied with, the terrifying Sanford Meisner, was in no way intellectual. And as I looked back, I went to the internet, of course, to see what was there about him, and oh my God. And there was a documentary that had been done about what's now called the Meisner technique. And it blew me away. It blew me away because it thrust me, talk about time travel, it took me back almost, like 40, 45 years to the exact room. It was the documentary showed the exact room that I'd sit in, terrified that he was going to turn to me. And there it was again, and there he was scaring the bejesus out of the students that were there when the documentary was made. But his whole thing is he broke us down because we all came there thinking that we knew how to act a little bit. And, we'd learn lines and then we'd say them the way the character would say them. And to him, he said lines are they are the least important thing. So he would have us, if we had lines, you could only memorize them and even say them in a monotone. Why did you kill that man? I can't stand this anymore. And I know when you're there, you're thinking, what the hell is this? It's because he wanted us to act from our emotional selves, not our heads. And he said it's that your head that is making you think I should say the line, why did you kill that man? No. Forget that. Have the emotion, the honest emotion in you. And believe me, if you have the honest emotion in you, the words will come out exactly as they should sound. Of course, this is easier said than done. But James Garner, who clearly was unschooled in theater, walked in and just did it. He understood. He said, tell the truth. Be honest. And then those are the great actors, people willing to unselfconsciously be totally real in unreal circumstances, in a fictional circumstance, placed in it, to allow themselves to feel. Now, obviously, some teachers took this to ridiculous lengths. Sometimes when you say, oh, yes, he's a method actor, that stuff can get crazy, and I think Meisner would agree that it could get crazy. But, yeah, so when I see that Garner, he never studied with the great Sanford Meisner, he just knew it intuitively, that acting is common sense. Just do the honest thing. I remember the day Meisner said another thing about what acting was, where I said to myself, I can't do it then. I knew I couldn't do it, and I was right. He said that an actor has to be willing to be private in public. So in other words, an actor has to be willing, if you're being honest, to behave exactly as a person would if no one were watching, and be able to do it when a room full of strangers is watching. That means you have to be, totally vulnerable. That means you have to be totally willing to, look ugly, to do something awful or impolite, to be whatever. I knew when he said it, because I am a self-conscious person. I couldn't do that. Not if I were going to rise to the level that he was asking, which is to be honest, to be true to what you would do. I couldn't do it. I knew that. So anyway. And you know what? In this documentary, all of a sudden, there's Gregory Peck, who I just love more than almost anybody. Gregory Peck. And I didn't know he studied with Meisner, but he did. And he said, he reacted exactly like I did to him. He said, I would say that it was 2 years of unrelieved stress. So I'm thinking, well, that's good to know that Gregory Peck sat in that room terrified. Okie doke. Well, I totally made it. I did not speak about any of those awful things. And you know what? We had a better time today, didn't we? We sure as hell did. So tomorrow, might even try it again. I don't know, but we'll see. Thank you. Hope to see you tomorrow, and have a great day.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.